everyone. This is Adam Fromal and Dan Favale here with the Full Court Press. Today we are going to be recapping the game between the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets that a lot of people on Twitter were calling the Toilet Bowl, and for good reason. New York came out on top 113 to 83. I don't know if we can say that they finally got off the schneid after losing like 9 straight games. So Dan, as a Knicks fan, what are you taking away from this game?
That ball movement is good, and that the Nets are really bad. That's it. No, seriously, I think it's good. This is kind of the gorilla the Knicks need to get off their back. But these are the Nets who didn't have Andre Kirilenko, Darren Williams, Paul Pierce. I don't think Brook Lopez is 100%, and even he played well. And KG is a shell of his former self now. I don't even see him playing with that same competitive fire.
Can you just point out how sad it was when Garnett was just playing terribly, to hear those commercials for the headphones like right after? It was just kind of heartbreaking to see him like tuning out all of the haters and then having to go back to the actual game where he couldn't tune it out.
It's bizarre because why would you have a commercial where haters are saying everything that's true? They should have made them like hyperbolic, and they didn't. All of it was true. So I never understood like those commercials. But it's sad to see him and Pierce kind of, we don't know what's going through their heads, obviously, but they clearly miss Boston, and I think that's what people didn't really think about when they first got traded is could they maintain that competitive desire they had playing for Boston. Pierce especially never played anywhere else, and people don't even associate Garnett with the Timberwolves anymore. It's all about the Celtics in the 6 years he was there. So they just don't have it this year. I haven't seen that fire. The Nets look like emotionless children.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many problems in Brooklyn right now, and it's hard to figure out who to blame. Like, a lot of people are pointing at Jason Kidd. A lot of people are pointing at Billy King for assembling a roster that just can't really compete, even though it was expected to. And after watching that game, I think I'm starting to fall more on the Kidd side of the spectrum, just because they don't have a system in place. Their offense has 3 options. They can throw the ball into Brook Lopez, who we're still calling Brolo, and hope something good happens. They can use an ISO Joe set and hope Joe Johnson makes something good happen, or they can just hope something good happens. Like, beyond that, they don't have anything in place, and they might even be worse on defense.
I think a lot of it, too, though, again, a lot of the blame falls on Kidd, and that whole Lawrence Frank debacle was just bad press and everything, but they need Darren Williams, the most important player on that team, and I don't know what the hell is wrong with his ankle, but they got to stop calling it a sprain. He's been out way too long for this to be a sprain. He's being paid almost $100 million. He should be back from a sprain by now. So I think a lot of it comes back to him being able to direct everyone because they don't have a legitimate playmaker. Even if you want to say Paul Pierce is their secondary playmaker, that's not exactly foolproof at this point in his career. And Sean Livingston, again, he's played well, and I know we split hairs on this part. I just don't see him as even a legitimate backup point guard. So, especially on a team like the Nets, where you have Darren Williams, who's injured all the time, I kind of liken it to the Warriors situation, only it's more grave at this point. They need a good backup because Stephen Curry's injured all the time, as the Nets need a good backup too because Darren Williams is injured all the time. I think once he comes back, if he comes back healthy, I don't think they'll be fine. You're right. Their offense doesn't have a harmony to it, but I think it will be a lot better.
It's tough to figure out exactly how much injuries are affecting this team. I mean, last night, Tyshawn Taylor, Mirza Teletovic, and Tornike Shengelia played 12 minutes together. I don't think that Brooklyn ever wanted them to spend even 1 minute together this season, and that's just how dire this situation has become with all the injuries. But even getting these pieces back, Darren Williams is going to be a big deal, but Paul Pierce looks like a shell of himself. I'm not sure how effective he's going to be, and we have no idea what the hell's happening with Kirilenko. So even at full strength, I'm continuing to lose faith in what they can do, even with all their pieces together.
Now, we both hate doing this, but I do have a question. Looking at Pierce, and I want to say this more so than Garnett, but looking at the two of them, do you think a lot of their problems come down to effort? I know Pierce is injured right now, but I'm talking beforehand because they were both atrocious.
No, I don't. I think both of them are way too competitive. That even in a situation where they aren't entirely happy, maybe they're missing Boston and the clam chowder, that they're still going to compete as much as possible. I think it's more them no longer being comfortable in the system or lack thereof, and that affecting their play. I mean, even though Rondo was the best player on the Celtics over the last couple of years, they were still the guys. They were the ones that everyone looked to. They were the ones that were going to have the ball in their hands or make the big defensive play in the crunch time situations. And that's no longer the case.
I definitely agree with you. Effort would probably be the wrong word because they're both very diligent players, but they seem to be taking a step back when they're on the court. So maybe it's not like a lethargic thing, it's a they're completely lost thing, like you kind of alluded to. They don't really understand the system. There isn't a system in place. And the Nets, especially with Darren Williams injured and Brook Lopez injured before, Brolo, excuse me, they need them to take over with that fire. I don't see Garnett talking on defense as much, and I'll never say that comes down to effort. I think it comes down to familiarity and comfort. And I don't think they're there. I don't know if they're ever going to get there because they're essentially rentals. I don't think Pierce is going to be back next year. I don't think Garnett's going to be back next year, whether he forces a trade or he retires. So I don't know if they're ever going to establish that chemistry. And until they have that chemistry, what the Nets just need is their energy. And I don't see the energy. And I'm not saying, again, that it's because they don't want to give that energy. I just don't think they grasp what the Nets need from them at this point. I know they talked about being glorified role players, but the Nets brought them in to be leaders, to have heart, to give this team a soul. This team doesn't have a soul. There's no emotion. And even when they're losing, you don't even see Garnett getting angry. I want to see him I want to see him punch Barnes in the face last night.
We need to see a little nasty.
Yeah, a lot nasty, because the Nets were a boring team last year. Darren Williams is a top 5 point guard when he's healthy and on. Top 5. But he doesn't show that emotion, that fire. And that's why Pierce and Garnett were brought in. Yeah, for their production, but for that fire. And in lieu of the production, you think they could always bring that fire, and they're not. And that kind of boggles my mind.
One of the things that disappointed me most about that game last night was looking at the bench whenever they would show it. And I understand the need to mentally escape when you're down 20 points, but I didn't like Pierce and D. Will just staring off into space. You know, maybe I'm overreacting to that, but I feel like they aren't fully invested. Maybe they've already given up on this season, which kind of brings me to my next question, which is how far do you think this team falls after watching this? The last time we talked about it, I think I said that I could see them dropping to number 10 in the East, and you said the worst you could see is number 9, and you could see them tentatively making the playoffs. Are we changing that? Or do you still think when they get the pieces back, the East is so bad that they can elevate back into that picture?
I do think they can get themselves back in the playoff picture. I no longer think they will. And it was something that we went back and forth on previously. I just always assumed there was going to come a point where KG and Pierce were going to just turn on the fire and it was going to become contagious. And I haven't seen that. And we're pushing the point where, we're a quarter of a way through the season, so there's 75% left of games left to play. But a quarter of the season's gone, and we're not seeing anything from this team. Again, Darren Williams is still injured. Even if they get healthy, how far back are they going to be by then? How far do you think they're going to fall by the time Pierce comes back in 3.5 weeks? They could literally be 6 or 7 games out by that point with, let's say, 70%, 65% of the season to play. Are they going to make up 7 games in a little bit more than half the season? No. So I do think they could, because the Atlantic Division especially is awful right now. But I'm coming over to your side. I've seen the light. The force is with me. This team is awful.
So speaking of seeing the light, we have the Knicks, who actually looked like they were playing with a little bit of fire last night. They made 57% of their shots. They made 16 three-pointers, which is just unheard of this season. They looked great, but I'm a little worried based on last night, just because a 30-point victory over you could call them a rival based on what we've seen the last couple seasons, is cause for celebration. But we're also talking about playing against a team that was completely incompetent. So in some ways, I'm a little worried that New York might get a little bit cocky based on one game that ended a long losing streak that left their hometown rival embarrassed. And I don't know, as weird as it is to say that I'm let down by a 30-point game, a 30-point win, like, it's kind of how I'm feeling here.
I don't know if you can or should feel rather let down, because what the Knicks essentially did is destroy an opponent they should have destroyed, which is never a bad sign. And I don't necessarily think it's going to make them cocky. I thought in the post-game pressers last night, they all did a good job of like, you know what, we won this game we needed to win, we won, let's move on. I think what you need to see a lot more of with this team, I still think they're an underrated basketball team, just because so many people are looking at, do you remember when they were predicted to win just 35 games this season? And I think everyone's looking at that now as their ceiling or where they're going to be. And I still see this club as a team that's probably not going to win 50 games anymore, but an above 500 team. I think you saw the blueprint in the second half last night for what works. And when the ball moves and when the Knicks shoot threes, this was only the 5th time this season that they hit 10 threes or more. By this point last season, 17 games in, they'd done that 12 times. And it's a matter of them shooting and the ball moving. And if Carmelo Anthony, I don't think he's going to put up 6 assists every night, but if his shot totals come down, that means the ball's still moving. And I think that's my bold prediction for them the rest of the season. I don't think you're going to see Carmelo Anthony consistently shoot above 20 shots a game anymore. I don't think it's going to happen.
I'd like to see that, because that third quarter that they had where they just dominated the Nets came once they started running those pick and pops and putting a lot of pressure. I mean, we know Melo loves to shoot those mid-range jumpers, but as soon as he stopped doing that and started posting up and running pick and pop or pick and roll sets, that's when the ball started moving. That's when the shots started falling with even greater frequency. And it was a good look. I mean, he's tried to play unselfishly all year. It hasn't worked because his teammates couldn't shoulder that burden. When he would pass them the ball, they'd miss the shots or they'd pass it right back to him. And for the first time, it seemed like the sets were actually allowing them to get shots that they could make.
It was almost like they were finally becoming used to, again, this is just the Nets, so I don't want to draw away bold conclusions, but it's almost like they're becoming comfortable with this new version of Melo, who is passing more. And Melo, he's been attacking the paint. He's settling for jump shots more since he left Denver. I saw the stats this morning, and it's ridiculous how much less he's quote-unquote attacking the rim. But he's been attacking the rim more this season and kicking out. And his teammates almost weren't comfortable with that. Like you said, they were giving it right back because they're not used to it. And it's almost like maybe they're becoming acclimated to this version of Carmelo Anthony because he's passing as much as Paul George, who everyone heralds as a point forward. And speaking of Paul George, our last podcast, you pointed out that I had a Burns My Bacon segment where I called him overrated, which I denied to the tooth because I'm a dumb shit. I actually did have that Burns My Bacon. I thought Paul George was wildly overrated coming into this season. I stand by what I said then. He's completely proved my sentiments wrong now. So I'm happy to say that you were right and I was mistaken. So we're going to write this down. But getting back to Carmelo Anthony, his teammates need to become used to this new version. Again, I don't think he's going to take only 12 shots every night. But if he takes between 18 and 20 a game, could this suddenly become a guy who's shooting better than 45, close to 50% from the field?
I think without a doubt.
And isn't that what the Knicks need? An efficient scorer, which they don't have. Carmelo Anthony is markedly more efficient than a Jamal Crawford or a Rudy Gay or a J.R. Smith. But if he can become an efficient scorer, and I'm not even talking about a point forward, because look at Paul George, who's not a point forward this season. He's just scoring efficiently, and look at what it's done for that team offensively. The Pacers are middling, which is pretty much saying that they're awesome because of how bad they were last year. So, and I don't want to say you need to see Melo take less shots. You need to see his teammates allow him to take less shots. And I don't think they were allowing him to do that until against the Nets. And it's just the Nets who are terrible at guarding the three. But I would like to see this be the blueprint for what they try moving forward.
I really like how you phrased that it's all about the teammates letting him take less shots, because he's shown so many times this season that he's willing to take less shots. You know, he got that scoring title out of the way last year. That's maybe no longer an individual goal. Well, I'm serious. Like,
no, you're right.
He's the kind of player where I could see him being like, I want this on my resume. Okay, it's checked off. Now we can change. You know, maybe like even a little like Wilt Chamberlain way back in the day when he wanted to get that assist title. So he went out of his way to change his game. And now that that's checked off, he can play the type of basketball that's going to be more effective. And now I think he's realizing it even more that it's necessary for him to do that for the team as a whole to be effective. But it's still about his teammates hitting shots.
And it's interesting that we're both saying this because I remember when we first kind of started discussing this season over the summer, or the off season rather, me and you were kind of bashing Melo. And even through our articles last year, I noticed that both of us were pretty hard on him. And it's funny how both of us have kind of converted to not superhuman Melo fans, but we kind of understand him now because we see him making that effort. And I don't think a lot of people have realized that. Again, he's not LeBron James, he's not Kevin Durant, he's not even Paul George at this point, if we're going to be quite frank. But he's trying to be different, and the Knicks just haven't allowed him to, or they're not used to it. And hopefully this serves as a blueprint for them moving forward. This could be a step in the right direction, even though it's just the Nets. I mean, morale's a big thing, because we just spent a few minutes on the Nets talking about how they need that fire. The Knicks kind of needed that fire. I mean, Bargnani was feeling it last night. He's pulling Kevin Garnett's pants down. He's getting jiggy with it. Like, I want to see emotion, and I think this is still an above 500 ball club. Don't think they're a title contender, and I don't want to read too much into this game. I don't want to get people to get excited.
I do want to point out that even when I was down on Melo as an individual last year, I still maintained that he was a player you could build around and win a championship. And it kind of pisses me off when I hear things like George Karl saying that he can't produce championships. Really? First of all, he won one at Syracuse as the lead player. I know it's different because it's the NCAA, not the NBA. But as long as you have a supporting cast that's going to hit shots and is going to space out the floor for him to go work in the post, yeah, he's talented enough to be the number one player on a championship team, especially when he plays like this.
I agree, and I also disagree to an extent. I believe he's someone you could build a championship contender around. I believe that last year. I believe it this year. I believe it when he came to New York. I do think that his play style, unless he can continue to play like this and his teammates hit shots, because this is where I'm at. We've seen him kind of become the more Paul George-y, Kevin Durant-ish version this season in terms of giving the ball up. His usage rate is still huge, but he's giving the ball up more. And the Knicks still aren't winning. So it leads me to believe that he might need to be the 1B to a 1A in today's NBA. To like a LeBron James. I'm not saying that it has to be LeBron James, because Melo's a phenomenal player. He's a top 10 star still, in my opinion. But I'm kind of seeing if the Knicks can't get used to this version of him, because it's so late in his career. And you touched upon George Karl. Carmelo Anthony wasn't guided the way he should have been in Denver early on. Kind of like we saw with LeBron in Cleveland. Difference is that he receives more exposure in general. He left Cleveland sooner, and so he kind of hit, I don't want to say rock bottom, but his perception, his public perception hit rock bottom, and so he was able to come back up. And I think that's where Melo finally hit. It just took him longer, and I think he understands now. But is it too late? So I think you already need that established guy with him now.
You're going to hate me for saying this, just warning you. But when you say that he needs to be a 1B to a 1A, do you mean something like playing with Kobe Bryant in Los Angeles next year?
I'm going to say that type of player in their prime. I think him and Kobe together, you know what? Oh my God, wow. I can't believe I'm about to say this. Him and Kobe could work if he's going to play like he's playing now and Kobe's going to play like he played last season. I didn't even think about that till just now. I don't think he's going to go to Los Angeles because, above all else, do you want to be the guy who couldn't win in New York and Los Angeles? Do you want to be that guy?
Does he have a choice?
What do you mean?
He's not going to win in New York. He's not. There's no way. They don't have the pieces in place right now, and they don't have the financial flexibility unless they find a way to move Stoudemire to change that.
I'm going to say something that no one's going to like, and I'm on record as saying this. I think LeBron James is going to be a Knick in 2015. I think him and Melo are going to be Knicks in 2015. That's my bold prediction. You can say it against all odds, but I think LeBron opts in this year with the Heat no matter what. And I think that he leaves after next year no matter what happens. I don't think Cleveland's even an option. The only two teams I could see him going to are the Knicks and the Lakers. And I don't think he's going to go to the Lakers and try and drum up Kobe Bryant's ring total. Because if LeBron went to the Lakers, I could kind of see Kobe Bryant trying to span his career another 5 years. Just to let me get to 10 rings or something ridiculous. So that's going to be my bold prediction. I'm on record as saying it. But because I don't want you to yell at me for making audacious claims on this podcast, it's that time again.
Bacon! Bacon! Where's the bacon? I smell bacon! 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 Gotta be bacon! Only one thing smells like bacon! That's bacon!
That's right. We're going to find out today what's burning Adam's bacon and making him sizzle.
Well, fortunately, you provided me with a fantastic segue by talking about a member of the Miami Heat, because my burning my bacon has to do with that as well. It's the rumors about the Heat trying to find a guard that can back up Dwayne Wade and provide an insurance policy for his knees. Great. I think the sentiment is fantastic. I think it would help them out. It would make them a stronger team. Now, how the fuck are you going to do that? Seriously, they're talking about trading Joel Anthony. First of all, he's not a valuable player at this stage in his career. There's no way they're going to get a quality piece for him. And I'm not sure anyone is going to want to take him on because he has a $3.8 million player option for next year. Do you think there's any way he's turning down that kind of money so it's not like he's an expiring contract? This roster isn't built to move pieces. They could move maybe Norris Cole, even though he's on a small contract, but that would completely defeat the purpose because they're trying to add another guard. There's really no one on the roster, assuming they're going to be loyal and keep someone like Udonis Haslem, that they could trade to find a quality guard who would actually be able to work his way into their rotation. It's not happening.
Well, that is what is burning Adam's bacon today, ladies and gentlemen. We want to know what's making you sizzle. Who do you think is better off, the Knicks or the Nets? For Adam, formerly known as Favale and Fromal, this is Dan Favale with the Full Court Press.